The fire had taken more than her skin, it had stolen her future, or so everyone kept telling her with their eyes. Juliana Bradford stood in front of the gilded mirror in her family's estate, adjusting the delicate lace sleeves that covered her arms from wrist to shoulder. The fabric was lovely, imported from France at considerable expense, but it served a purpose beyond fashion. Beneath the intricate patterns and soft material lay ridges of scarred tissue, pink and white and twisted, souvenirs from the night 3 years ago when her father's study had erupted in flames. She'd been 17 then, foolish enough to run back inside for a box of her mother's letters. And she'd paid for that sentimentality with her arms and very nearly her life. Now, at 21, she was considered damaged goods in the marriage market, despite her family's considerable wealth and social standing. Her father, Richard Bradford, had exhausted his patience with her rejections of various suitors, all of whom had eventually withdrawn their offers once they'd glimpsed what lay beneath her careful coverings. The last one, Lord Pembroke's son, had actually recoiled, making an excuse about remembering a prior engagement before fleeing her presence entirely. "You'll meet him tonight?" her father said from the doorway, his voice tight with the strain of maintaining appearances. "Lord Ravenscroft Falkenburg. He's recently returned from abroad and he's expressed interest in meeting you." Juliana turned from the mirror, her dark hair pinned in an elaborate style that had taken her maid an hour to achieve. "Another one? Father, surely we can stop this charade. No one wants a wife who looks like a monster beneath her sleeves." "Don't speak that way," he said, though his eyes held more desperation than conviction. "Lord Falkenburg is different, eccentric, they say, keeps unusual hours. But his title is ancient and his wealth beyond measure. If he's willing to overlook your circumstances, then you'd be a fool to refuse him." She wanted to argue, to tell him that she'd rather live as a spinster than continue parading herself before men who looked at her with barely concealed disgust. But the words died in her throat. Her father had aged considerably in the past 3 years, the weight of social expectation and dwindling finances pressing down on him. Their estate was grand, but the coffers were running dry. A good marriage wasn't just about her future anymore, it was about her family's survival. "What time?" she asked quietly. 8 o'clock. "He's requested a private dinner in the garden. Just the two of you." That was unusual enough to make her pause. Most suitors preferred the safety of supervised parlor visits, with chaperones hovering nearby to ensure propriety. A private dinner suggested either remarkable confidence or remarkable impropriety, and she wasn't sure which unsettled her more. The evening arrived with autumn's chill, and Juliana wrapped a silk shawl around her shoulders as she made her way through the torchlit gardens. The staff had outdone themselves, stringing lights through the ancient oak trees and setting a table with their finest china. Candles flickered in glass holders, casting dancing shadows across the manicured lawns. She saw him before he saw her, and the sight stopped her in her tracks. Lord Ravenscroft Falkenburg stood with his back to her, gazing up at the stars with an intensity that seemed almost otherworldly. His hair was pure white, not the silver of age but the brilliant white of fresh snow, falling past his shoulders in a straight cascade that caught the moonlight. When he turned at the sound of her footsteps, she found herself staring into eyes that were such a pale blue they were nearly silver, set in a face that was beautiful in a way that made her chest tighten. His skin was porcelain, pale, flawless, and when he smiled, there was something predatory in it that made every instinct scream danger even as her pulse quickened for entirely different reasons. "Miss Bradford," he said, his voice is a rich baritone with an accent she couldn't quite place. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." She managed to curtsy, suddenly aware of how inadequate she must seem compared to his otherworldly beauty. "Lord Falkenburg, the pleasure is mine. Please call me Ravenscroft. Formality seems tedious when one is hoping to get to know someone properly." He moved with inhuman grace as he pulled out her chair, and she caught a scent like winter wind and old stone. "I hope you don't mind dining under the stars. I find indoor spaces confining." They sat, and servants appeared with the first course, a delicate soup that Juliana barely tasted. She was too aware of his gaze on her, studying her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and strangely safe. "You're nervous," he observed, not unkindly. "Is it me specifically or the situation in general?" His directness surprised her into honesty. "Both, if I'm being truthful. These meetings rarely end well for me because of your scars." It wasn't a question. She felt her face flush, her hands instinctively moving to adjust her sleeves even though they were already perfectly in place. "My father told you." "He didn't need to. I make it my business to know things." Ravenscroft set down his spoon, his pale eyes never leaving her face. "But I'm not interested in your scars, Juliana. I'm interested in the woman who ran into a burning building to save her mother's memory. That takes a courage most people don't possess. She blinked, taken aback. No one had ever framed it that way. Usually they called it foolishness, recklessness, a tragic mistake. You're the first person to see it as anything other than stupidity, then everyone else is a fool. He leaned back in his chair, and in the candlelight, his features seemed to shift, becoming more angular, more dangerous. Tell me, what do you think of the old stories? Vampires, werewolves, things that go bump in the night? The abrupt change in subject threw her. I suppose I never gave them much thought. Children's tales, aren't they? Are they? His smile widened, and this time she saw them clearly, fangs, sharp and white, where human canines should have been. What if I told you that some of those stories were true? That monsters walk among humans, hidden in plain sight, living by rules and codes older than your civilization? Juliana's breath caught in her throat. She should have been terrified. Any sane person would have screamed, would have run. But something about the way he looked at her, like she was precious rather than prey, kept her frozen in place. I would ask why you're telling me this, because I'm tired of lies. Ravenscroft stood, moving around the table with that impossible grace. I am Ravenscroft Falkenburg, king of the Northern Vampire Court, and I am very, very old. I came to this city because my sources told me there was a woman here worth meeting. A woman who'd been rejected by lesser men because they couldn't see past surface damage to the strength beneath. He stopped beside her chair, and when she looked up at him, his expression was fierce. Show me. What? Your arms. Show me what they're so afraid of. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Why would you want to see them? Because I want to know all of you. Not the careful facade you present to the world, but the truth of who you are, scars included. His voice gentled. I'm not asking to judge you, Juliana. I'm asking because I need you to understand that nothing you show me will make me turn away. Her hands trembled as she reached for the buttons at her wrists. She'd never willingly revealed her arms to anyone outside of her doctor and her maid. The vulnerability of it felt like standing naked in a crowded square. But something in his eyes, ancient and knowing and utterly sincere, gave her courage. The lace fell away slowly, first one arm, then the other. The scars were extensive, running from her wrists up past her elbows, a topography of pain written in damaged skin. Some areas were smooth and shiny, others puckered and rough. In the candlelight, they seemed to glow with their own terrible beauty. Ravenscroft was silent for a long moment, and Juliana braced herself for the familiar expressions of pity or disgust. Instead, he dropped to one knee beside her chair, his pale eyes filled with something that looked almost like reverence. May I? He asked, hovering his hand above her arm. She nodded, not trusting her voice. His fingers were cool against her damaged skin, tracing the patterns of scarring with a gentleness that made her eyes sting. Then, slowly, deliberately, he brought her wrist to his lips and kissed a particularly rough patch of scar tissue. Then another, and another. He worked his way up her arm with infinite patience, pressing his lips to every mark, every ridge, every reminder of pain endured and survived. Tears spilled down Juliana's cheeks before she could stop them. No one had ever touched her scars with anything other than clinical detachment or barely concealed revulsion. Certainly no one had kissed them like they were something precious. You're beautiful, Ravenscroft murmured against her skin. Every part of you. These scars are proof that you loved deeply enough to risk everything, that you're strong enough to survive what would have killed weaker souls. Don't ever let anyone make you feel ashamed of them. I don't understand, she whispered. You're a king, you could have anyone. Why would you want someone like me? He looked up at her, still holding her scarred arms gently in his hands. Because in 800 years of existence, I've never met anyone who made me feel the way you do. I've seen countless beautiful faces, perfect bodies, flawless skin. They're tedious, forgettable. But you're real. You've suffered and survived and refused to let it break you, even when the world tried its best to grind you down. His grip tightened slightly. I came here looking for a queen, Juliana. Someone strong enough to stand beside me, to rule with me, to face the dangers of my world without flinching. I think I've found her. You can't be serious. We've just met. I've lived for centuries. I know what I want when I see it. He rose fluidly, still holding her hands. But I'm not asking you to decide tonight. I'm asking for a chance to court you properly, to show you what life could be like in my world. And if at the end of it you decide you want no part of it, I'll respect that decision and never trouble you again. Juliana's mind reeled. A vampire king wanted to court her. It was absurd, impossible, and yet the evidence was kneeling before her with fangs and otherworldly beauty and hands that held her scars like they were made of spun glass. What would courting a vampire king even involve? Well, for starters, extremely inconvenient hours. I can't go out in sunlight, it won't kill me, but it's intensely uncomfortable. Most of our time together would be at night. He pulled her gently to her feet. I'd show you my world, the vampire court, the society we've built in the shadows of yours. I'd introduce you to others of my kind, let you see what you'd be getting into. And I'd do everything in my power to make you happy. And if someone from your world objects to you courting a human, his expression darkened, and for a moment she saw the king in him, the predator, the creature that had survived for 8 centuries through strength and cunning. Then they would learn very quickly that I don't tolerate challenges to my authority. You would be under my protection, Juliana. No one would dare harm you. The possessive certainty in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it sent a thrill down her spine that she didn't want to examine too closely. This is insane. Yes, he agreed with a slight smile. But sometimes insanity is just another word for possibility. Say yes. Let me show you a world beyond drawing rooms and disappointed suitors. Let me show you what it means to be treasured exactly as you are. She thought of her father's desperation, the dwindling family fortune, the endless parade of men who looked at her with varying degrees of disappointment. She thought of the life stretching before her, years of being seen as damaged, lesser, a burden to be borne rather than a person to be loved. And then she thought of the way Ravenscroft had kissed her scars like they were holy relics. Yes, she heard herself say. Yes, I'll let you court me. His smile transformed his face from beautiful to devastating. Then we begin tomorrow night. I'll send a car for you at sunset. Wear something comfortable, we'll be doing quite a bit of walking. He kissed her hand, a formal gesture that somehow felt intimate, and then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows with supernatural speed. Juliana stood alone in the garden, her bare arms exposed to the night air, and for the first time in 3 years she didn't immediately reach to cover them. The next evening, Juliana spent an unreasonable amount of time selecting her outfit. Ravenscroft had said comfortable, so she chose a dark blue dress with a practical hem and sensible boots, but she took extra care with her hair and the touches of makeup that made her feel confident. Her sleeves were long because old habits died hard, but they were simpler than her usual elaborate coverings. Her father appeared as she was adding a final pin to her hair. He wants to see you again so soon? He's taking me out, to show me his world apparently. She met her father's eyes in the mirror. Did you know what he was when you invited him here? Richard Bradford's silence was answer enough. How, she demanded, turning to face him. How did you even make contact with a vampire king? Desperation makes one seek out unconventional solutions. Her father looked older in the lamplight, the lines around his eyes deeper than she remembered. I heard rumors of a vampire lord seeking a human bride. I put out inquiries through certain channels and eventually his people contacted me. When they asked about available women of good family, I mentioned you. You sold me to a vampire. The words came out flat, emotionless. I gave you a chance at a life better than the one awaiting you here. He stepped forward, earnest now. Do you think I don't see how they treat you? How every suitor finds an excuse to withdraw. Lord Falkenburg could give you everything: wealth, position, a husband who doesn't care about your scars. Yes, he's dangerous, but he's also powerful enough to protect you from any threat. Juliana wanted to be angry, but she couldn't quite manage it. Her father had done what he thought necessary, just as she had when she'd run into that burning building. They were both survivors, doing whatever it took to protect what they loved. Did he pay you? He settled our debts, all of them. The estate is secure for the next 50 years at least. Richard's voice cracked slightly. I'm not proud of the method, but I won't apologize for the outcome. You deserve happiness, Juliana, even if I had to bargain with a vampire to give you a chance at it. Before she could respond, the butler appeared at the door. Miss Bradford, your car has arrived. The vehicle waiting outside was unlike anything she'd seen before, sleek and black, with windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. The driver, a pale woman with silver hair cut short, opened the door with a slight bow. Miss Bradford, Lord Falkenburg is waiting for you. The interior was luxurious, all leather and dark wood, and Ravenscroft sat in the back with a smile that made her heart skip. He wore all black tonight, from his tailored jacket to his boots, and his white hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp angles of his face. You look lovely, thank you. She settled beside him as the car pulled smoothly away from the estate. My father told me how you met, that he essentially offered me to you. Does that bother you? I'm not sure yet. It feels like I should be angry about being bartered like property, but honestly it's not much different from how marriages work in my social class anyway. At least you were honest about what you are. I don't believe in deception, not in matters this important. The car navigated through the city streets, heading toward the older district where buildings dated back centuries. Your father was desperate, and I was in need of a solution to a political problem. We came to an arrangement that benefited both parties. But understand this, I didn't agree to court you because of any bargain with your father. I agreed because from the moment I saw your photograph, read about your story, I knew you were remarkable. Meeting you only confirmed it. What political problem requires a human bride? Direct as always. I like that about you. Ravenscroft gazed out the window as the car descended into what appeared to be an underground parking structure. Except they kept going down far deeper than any normal building would go. Vampire society is divided into courts: northern, southern, eastern, and western. I rule the north, but there's been growing unrest. Some of my subjects believe we should stop hiding from humans, that we should rule openly as we did in ancient times. Others think we've grown too separate from humanity, that we've lost touch with what makes us effective predators and rulers, and a human queen would solve this. How? By proving that we can bridge both worlds, that we can be part of human society without losing what we are, but also without dominating it through fear and violence. The car stopped and he turned to face her. You'd be a symbol, Juliana, of possibility, of change, of a future where vampires don't have to hide but also don't have to terrorize. It's a tremendous burden to place on anyone, which is why I need someone strong enough to bear it. The door opened onto a scene that stole Juliana's breath. They'd arrived in what could only be described as an underground city, carved from living stone and lit by thousands of crystals that glowed with soft blue light. Gothic architecture soared overhead, vaulted ceilings, flying buttresses, intricate carvings that must have taken centuries to complete. Vampires moved through the streets, all of them bearing that same pale beauty, that same predatory grace. They stopped to stare as Ravenscroft emerged from the car, offering his hand to help Juliana out. "Welcome to Nocturne," he said quietly, "the heart of the northern court." Juliana stepped out into a world she'd never imagined existed. The air was cool and still, carrying scents of stone and something else, something old and vast. Vampires gathered at a respectful distance, their silver and blue eyes fixed on her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. She resisted the urge to cover her arms, instead lifting her chin the way her mother had taught her when facing down society gossips. "They're all staring," she murmured to Ravenscroft. "Of course they are. You're human, you're with me, and you're not cowering in terror. That makes you fascinating." He placed a possessive hand on the small of her back, guiding her forward. "Ignore the hostile ones. They'll fall in line or face consequences." They walked through streets that seemed designed for beauty rather than mere function. Every surface was carved with intricate patterns. Every corner held sculptures or fountains. Vampires bowed as Ravenscroft passed, though their eyes kept darting to Juliana with unreadable expressions. She caught snippets of whispered conversations too quick for her to fully understand, but the tone was clear enough. Some were excited, others outraged. "How many vampires live here?" she asked. "In Nocturne itself, about 5,000. In my full territory, nearly 50,000 spread across various cities and settlements." He led her toward a massive structure at the city's center, a palace of sorts with soaring towers and windows of colored crystal. "This is the Pale Citadel, where I hold court and where I live. I thought we'd start with the throne room, let you see the formal side of vampire politics before we get to the more pleasant aspects of the evening." The interior of the citadel was even more impressive than the outside. Hallways stretched in every direction, lined with tapestries and paintings that looked ancient. Servants both vampire and human, she realized with a start, hurried about their business. They climbed a grand staircase to a set of massive doors that swung open at their approach. The throne room was vast, the ceiling lost in shadows far overhead. The throne itself was carved from a single piece of black stone, inlaid with silver in patterns that hurt to look at directly. But it was the vampires assembled in the room that drew Juliana's attention, dozens of them, all dressed in elaborate finery, all radiating power and barely contained violence. "My lords and ladies," Ravenscroft announced, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space, "allow me to present Miss Juliana Bradford, who has agreed to let me court her with the intention of making her my queen." The silence that followed was deafening. Then a vampire stepped forward, a woman with white hair piled high and eyes like chips of ice. Her gown was deep crimson, and when she spoke her voice dripped with disdain. "You cannot be serious, my king. A human? A scarred human at that? We are descended from ancient bloodlines, and you would pollute the throne with mortal weakness?" Ravenscroft's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Lady Celine, would you care to repeat that insult where I can hear it more clearly?" The woman, Lady Celine, faltered, but pride kept her spine straight. "I speak for many here when I question this decision. We need a queen who understands our ways, who possesses our strength and immortality. Not some fragile human who will age and die in the blink of an eye." "First," Ravenscroft said, his voice quiet but laced with deadly promise. "You will address Miss Bradford with the respect her position demands, or you will find yourself removed from this court permanently. Second, you presume to know what I need better than I do myself, which suggests you've forgotten the pecking order here. Should I remind you, power radiated from him now, palpable and terrifying. Several vampires actually stepped back, and Lady Selene went even paler than her natural shade. My king, I meant no offense. You merely insulted my chosen consort in my own throne room. That requires consequences." He glanced at Juliana, and his expression softened fractionally. "What do you think, my dear? What should we do with someone who calls you scarred and weak?" Every eye in the room turned to her. Juliana's heart pounded, but she forced herself to meet Lady Selene's gaze steadily. This was a test, she realized, not just of her courage, but of her judgment, her capacity to handle the political complexities of Ravenscroft's world. "I think," she said carefully, "that Lady Selene is afraid. Change is frightening, especially when it threatens the established order. I am scarred and I am mortal, and those are facts that can't be disputed. Whether they make me weak is yet to be determined." She turned to Ravenscroft. "I'd suggest giving her a chance to prove her loyalty rather than punishing honest concerns, however rudely expressed. You want me to be a bridge between worlds that has to start with understanding and communication, not fear." The silence returned, but this time it felt different, speculative rather than hostile. Ravenscroft studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Well reasoned, Lady Selene. You have Miss Bradford's mercy, which is more than you deserve. I suggest you use this opportunity to reconsider your position." The vampire woman bowed deeply, and when she straightened, her expression was guarded but no longer openly contemptuous. "Thank you, Miss Bradford. I will consider what you've said." Other vampires came forward then, offering formal greetings with varying degrees of warmth. Some seemed genuinely curious, asking her about human customs and current events. Others were coldly polite, their skepticism clear. Through it all, Ravenscroft stayed at her side, his presence a constant reminder that she was under his protection. Finally, after what felt like hours, he guided her out of the throne room and down a different corridor. "You handled that well," he said once they were alone. "Better than I expected, honestly. Most humans confronted with hostile vampires either freeze or flee. I grew up navigating society politics. Vampire court isn't that different from a ballroom full of titled snobs, except you're all honest about wanting to tear each other's throats out." She glanced at him. "Would you really have punished Lady Selene if I'd asked you to?" "Yes, but I'm glad you didn't. You're right that ruling through fear alone creates resentment that eventually leads to rebellion. A smart queen tempers justice with mercy." They emerged onto a balcony overlooking Nocturne, the underground city spread out below like a constellation of blue-white stars. "The truth is, I've been too heavy-handed in my rule lately, too focused on maintaining control through strength. It's made some of my subjects restless, looking for someone to challenge my authority." "Is that why you need a human queen? To show them a different way?" "Partly, but also because I've grown tired of existing rather than living." He moved closer, and she felt the coolness of his presence like a physical touch. 800 years is a long time, Juliana. I've seen empires rise and fall, watched humanity grow from feudal kingdoms to global civilization. I've loved and lost, fought and conquered, and somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to be genuinely surprised by someone. Then I heard about you. A scarred woman rejected by her own kind? That surprised you? A woman who ran into a burning building for love, who survived what should have killed her, and who refused to let the world's cruelty make her cruel in return. Yes, that surprised me. It reminded me that strength comes in many forms, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is remain gentle in the face of pain. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. "I want to know you, Juliana, all of you. Not just the poised woman you present to my court, but the person beneath. Your fears, your dreams, what makes you laugh, what makes you cry. Give me the chance to do that." Standing on a balcony in an underground vampire city, with a creature of legend touching her face like she was precious, Juliana felt something shift inside her chest. Fear still lingered at the edges of her mind, but it was overwhelmed by something else: possibility, hope, and the beginning of feelings she wasn't ready to name. "I'm afraid," she admitted, "of this world, of what you're offering, of how quickly I'm starting to care about you. It's only been 2 days. This should feel rushed and wrong, but instead it feels right," he finished. "I know, I feel it too." He leaned closer, his breath cool against her face. "I'm going to kiss you now, if you'll allow it," she answered by closing the distance between them. Kissing a vampire was nothing like she'd imagined. His lips were cool but not cold, gentle but not tentative. He kissed her like she was rare and valuable. one hand cradling her face while the other found the small of her back, pulling her closer. She felt the careful control in him, the leashed power that could crush her if he wanted, but instead held her like spun glass. When his tongue traced her lower lip, she opened for him, and the kiss deepened into something that made her knees weak. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless though she suspected he didn't actually need to breathe, Ravenscroft rested his forehead against hers. "I want to show you something. Something no human has seen in 3 centuries. He led her deeper into the citadel, down corridors that grew progressively older, the stone rougher and the carvings more primitive. They descended stairs that seemed to go on forever, and the air grew colder, carrying a scent like ancient crypts and forgotten places. Finally, they reached a massive door covered in symbols that seemed to writhe in the light from Ravenscroft's carried torch. "This is the archive," he said, pushing the door open. "The collective memory of vampire kind going back to our origins. Every major event, every alliance, every war recorded and preserved. I'm one of 3 people with access to it." The archive was enormous, a library that stretched beyond the reach of light. Shelves towered overhead, filled with books and scrolls and tablets carved from stone. Crystal spheres held what looked like captured light, memories preserved in physical form. At the room's center was a table covered in maps and documents, and it was to this that Ravenscroft led her. "This is what I wanted you to see." He unrolled a parchment that looked ancient, covered in elegant script and detailed illustrations. "The original treaty between vampire and human, signed when your kind first developed civilization enough to pose a potential threat. We agreed to hide, to hunt carefully, to maintain the balance between our worlds. In return, certain human families agreed to protect the secret, to help us hide when necessary, and to provide willing donors when hunting became too dangerous." Juliana studied the document, her fingers hovering above the faded ink. "This is thousands of years old, 5,000, give or take a century, and it's held mostly because both sides benefited from the arrangement. But the world has changed. Humans have technology now that could expose us, weapons that could actually threaten us. And some vampires think the treaty is obsolete, that we should either reveal ourselves or take control before humanity becomes too powerful to coexist with." He rolled the parchment back up carefully. A human queen would renew the treaty in a way nothing else could. It would prove that coexistence is still possible, still beneficial. "No pressure then," Juliana said wryly. "Just the fate of 2 species resting on whether or not I'm queen material. I won't lie to you, it's a tremendous responsibility. But I wouldn't ask you to bear it if I didn't believe you were capable." He turned to face her fully. "And I need you to understand something else. If you agree to become my queen, I would offer you immortality. Turning you into a vampire would be complicated. The process is difficult and dangerous, and not everyone survives it. But if you did survive, you would have centuries to rule beside me, to see the future we could build together." The offer hung between them, monumental and terrifying. Juliana's mind raced with implications. To become a vampire would mean giving up sunlight, giving up her humanity, giving up any chance of the normal life she'd once imagined for herself. But what life was that, really? Years of being seen as damaged, of settling for a loveless marriage if she could find anyone willing to take her at all. Or decades alone, watching her youth fade while she became the eccentric spinster aunt that children whispered about. "I need time to think about that," she said finally. "The immortality part, I mean. Everything else is happening fast enough without adding species transformation to the mix. Of course, I'm not asking you to decide now. I just wanted you to know it's an option if this goes where I hope it goes." He pulled out a crystal sphere from a shelf and it began to glow with soft light. "These are memory spheres. They store moments from vampire history. Would you like to see some? It might help you understand us better." She nodded, and he placed the sphere on the table between them. The light expanded, and suddenly she was seeing through someone else's eyes, a vampire standing in what looked like ancient Rome, watching humans go about their daily lives. The memory shifted, showing a vampire council meeting in a medieval castle, then a vampire artist painting in Renaissance Florence. Each memory was vivid and immediate, showing her centuries of hidden history. "We've always been part of your world," Ravenscroft said softly. "Sometimes as scholars, sometimes as artists, sometimes as the monsters in your nightmares. But always watching, always adapting, always trying to find our place in a world that wasn't quite made for us." Juliana watched memory after memory play out, seeing vampires fall in love, raise families in their own way, struggle with the weight of immortality. It made them seem less like monsters and more like people dealing with extraordinary circumstances. "You've loved before," she observed. "I can see it in some of these memories. Twice. Once in the 14th century she was human, and she died of plague before I could turn her. Once in the 17th century she was vampire, and she was killed in a political purge when the Eastern court tried to overthrow my rule. His voice was distant, touched with old pain. I've lived a long time, Juliana. I've loved and lost and eventually stopped letting myself feel that deeply because the pain of loss seemed worse than the joy of connection. Until recently. What changed? I did. Or rather, I realized I was tired of being afraid. Tired of ruling from a distance, of holding everyone at arm's length because mortality or politics might take them from me. He took her hand, his fingers cool and steady around hers. You make me want to be brave again. To risk my heart even knowing it might get broken. That's terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. They stood in the archive for hours, talking and sharing memories and learning each other. Ravenscroft told her about his human life, which he barely remembered after 8 centuries as a vampire. He told her about the political intricacies of vampire society, the feuds and alliances that shaped their world. In return, Juliana told him about growing up in a world that valued appearance over substance, about her mother's death when she was 12, about the fire and everything that came after. The worst part wasn't the pain, she found herself saying. It was watching people's expressions change. Before the fire I was pretty enough. Not a great beauty, but acceptable. After I became the poor Bradford girl with the terrible scars. I went from being a person to being a tragedy in the space of a single night. Their loss, Ravenscroft said firmly. Any man who couldn't see past your scars to the extraordinary woman beneath wasn't worthy of you in the first place. It was nearly dawn when they finally left the archive. Ravenscroft led her back to the car, and the driver who'd apparently been waiting the entire time took them back to the surface. The sky was just beginning to lighten in the east, and Ravenscroft flinched slightly as the first rays of pre-dawn touched the horizon. You should go, Juliana said. Before the sun gets too strong. I'll be fine for a few more minutes. But she could see the discomfort in the tightness around his eyes, the way he angled himself away from the growing light. When can I see you again? Tomorrow night? Or tonight, I suppose, since it's technically morning now. I'll send the car at sunset. Wear something fancy. I want to take you to dinner at one of the surface establishments. A proper date, with food you can actually eat and conversation that doesn't revolve around vampire politics. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. Sweet dreams, Juliana. He vanished into the car, which pulled away quickly, heading for whatever underground entrance would get him back to Nocturne before the sun fully rose. Juliana stood in her family's driveway, watching the dawn paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, and tried to process everything that had happened. She was being courted by a vampire king. She'd seen an underground city and met beings out of legend. She'd been kissed in a way that made her entire body ache with wanting more. And in the span of 2 days she'd felt more alive, more seen, more valued than she had in 3 years of being treated like damaged goods by her own people. Her father met her at the door, his face creased with worry. Did he hurt you? No, he was perfect. Juliana moved past him toward her room, exhaustion finally catching up with her. He wants to make me his queen, father. He wants to offer me immortality and a place in a world I didn't know existed. And the terrifying thing is, I'm actually considering it. She fell asleep to dreams of underground cities and cool lips on scarred skin, and for the first time in years she didn't dream of fire. The next several weeks fell into a pattern that felt both surreal and increasingly natural. Every evening at sunset the black car would arrive to take Juliana into Ravenscroft's world. Sometimes they dined at exclusive restaurants where the staff knew to serve him drinks that definitely weren't wine. Sometimes they returned to Nocturne, where she slowly became a familiar face in the underground city. And sometimes they simply walked through the city streets, talking about everything and nothing, while the night deepened around them. Juliana learned the intricacies of vampire politics, how the four courts maintained their territories, the ancient bloodlines that commanded respect, the younger vampires who chafed at old traditions. She met Ravenscroft's inner circle, Lord Theron, his military commander, who was gruff but fair, Lady Evangeline, his chief advisor, who treated Juliana with cautious approval, and Marcus, a younger vampire who served as Ravenscroft's personal assistant and who seemed delighted by the novelty of a human consort. In return, she brought Ravenscroft into her world. She took him to art galleries and theater performances, places where he could appreciate human creativity without worrying about the sunlight. She introduced him to her small circle of friends, the ones who'd stuck by her after the fire, and watched them struggle to reconcile the powerful, otherworldly creature with the man who listened intently to their stories and laughed at their jokes. You're different with them, Ravenscroft observed one night as they drove away from a dinner party. More relaxed. You smile more easily. They don't care about my scars. They never did. Juliana adjusted her sleeves, a habit she was slowly breaking. With most people, I feel like I have to prove I'm more than the damaged girl. With my real friends, I can just be myself. Then I'm grateful they're part of your life. And I hope eventually you'll feel comfortable enough with me to be that version of yourself all the time. I'm getting there, she admitted. It's just, this is still so new. Some mornings I wake up and think I've dreamed the whole thing. Then the car arrives at sunset, and you're real again. He reached across the seat to take her hand. I'm very real and I'm not going anywhere. But not everything was romantic dates and deepening connection. There were complications, threats that reminded Juliana just how dangerous Ravenscroft's world could be. It started with small incidents: vampires from Lady Celine's faction making pointed comments about human fragility, whispers that the king was distracted by his pet mortal. Ravenscroft handled them with a combination of diplomacy and barely veiled threats. But Juliana could see the strain it put on him. He was walking a tightrope, trying to court her while maintaining his authority over a court that was increasingly divided. Then came the night everything changed. They were attending a formal gathering in Nocturne, a celebration of some ancient vampire holiday that Juliana didn't fully understand. She wore a gown that Ravenscroft had commissioned for her, deep midnight blue with silver embroidery that caught the crystal light. For the first time she'd agreed to short sleeves, letting her scars show openly. Ravenscroft had kissed each one before they left his chambers, and the memory of it gave her courage as they entered the great hall. The celebration was elaborate music from vampire composers, dancing that followed patterns centuries old, and conversations in multiple languages. Juliana stayed close to Ravenscroft, aware that she was being watched by hundreds of eyes, judged by beings who had forgotten more than she would ever learn. Lady Celine approached during a break in the music, her expression unreadable. "Miss Bradford, you look different tonight. More confident, Thank you, Lady Celine." Juliana kept her tone polite but not warm. The vampire woman had been coldly correct since their first meeting, but never genuinely friendly. "I wanted to apologize for my initial rudeness. I spoke from fear, and fear makes fools of us all." Celine's pale eyes flicked to Ravenscroft, then back to Juliana. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for. Perhaps strong enough for what's coming." Before Juliana could ask what that meant, a commotion erupted near the entrance to the hall. Vampires scattered, revealing a group of newcomers dressed in deep crimson, the colors of the southern court. Juliana had learned. They moved with aggressive confidence, and at their center was a vampire who radiated power and malice in equal measure. "Lord Casimir," Ravenscroft said, his voice cold enough to freeze blood. "This is unexpected. I don't recall inviting the southern court to our celebration." Lord Casimir smiled, revealing fangs that seemed sharper than normal. He had white hair like all vampires, but his was cut short, almost military in style, and his eyes were deep red rather than the silver blue of the northern court. "Come now, Ravenscroft. When did we start requiring invitations between old friends? We stopped being friends 300 years ago, when you tried to assassinate me and claim my territory." Ravenscroft positioned himself slightly in front of Juliana, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed. "State your business and leave. My business is with your little human pet." Casimir's red eyes fixed on Juliana with predatory interest. "I've heard so much about the scarred woman who's captured our great king's heart. I wanted to see for myself what makes her so special." The hall had gone silent, every vampire present aware that they were witnessing something dangerous. Juliana felt her pulse quicken, but she forced herself to step out from behind Ravenscroft. She wouldn't hide, wouldn't give Casimir the satisfaction of seeing her cower. "Lord Casimir," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I'm afraid you've wasted a trip. I'm just a woman who happens to be courting your king. Nothing special about it." "Oh, but there is something special." Casimir moved closer, and several of Ravenscroft's guards tensed. "You see, a human queen would change everything. It would suggest that we vampires need humans for more than just food, that we should treat them as equals rather than livestock. Some of us find that idea troubling." "Some of you are stuck in the past," Ravenscroft said. "The world has changed, Casimir. We adapt or we die. Or we take what should be ours by right. We're stronger, faster, nearly immortal. Why should we hide in the shadows when we could rule openly?" Casimir's smile widened. "But I'm not here to debate philosophy. I'm here to issue a challenge. Under the old laws, I have the right to contest your choice of queen." Ravenscroft went very still. "You're challenging me for her?" "I'm challenging you for the right to be her suitor. Let's see if your human is loyal to you, or if she'd prefer a mate who isn't soft on mortals." Casimir's gaze raked over Juliana. "What do you say, little human? Shall we see if the Southern King can offer you more than your precious Ravenscroft? I say you're delusional if you think I'd choose someone who sees my entire species as livestock. Julie kept her chin up despite the fear coursing through her veins. Ravenscroft treats me with respect. You treat me like a prize to be won. The choice isn't difficult. Casimir's expression darkened. Then it seems we'll have to do this the old-fashioned way. Ravenscroft, I challenge you to formal combat. If I win, Miss Bradford becomes mine. If you win, I'll withdraw my objection to a human queen and support your rule publicly. No! Juliana's voice rang out before Ravenscroft could respond. You don't get to fight over me like I'm property. I'm not a prize or a political pawn. If you want to challenge Ravenscroft's authority, do it without using me as an excuse. Bravely spoken, Casimir said, but irrelevant. The challenge has been issued under ancient law. Ravenscroft must answer it or forfeit his claim to you by default. Ravenscroft's hand found Juliana's, squeezing gently. I accept your challenge, Casimir. But know this: when I win, and I will win, you'll swear fealty to me publicly and you'll leave my territory and never threaten anyone under my protection again. Those are my terms, agreed. We'll meet at midnight tomorrow in the arena. Formal combat rules: no weapons, no magic, fight until one of us yields or dies. Casimir bowed mockingly. Until then, my king. The Southern Court vampires swept out as dramatically as they'd arrived, leaving chaos in their wake. Vampires clustered in groups, whispering urgently. Juliana heard her name repeated over and over, mixed with speculation and concern. Get her out of here, Ravenscroft said quietly to Marcus. Take her out to my private chambers and don't let anyone near her except Evangeline or Theron. No, Juliana said firmly. We're not separating. If I'm the cause of this challenge, I have a right to be part of the discussion about what happens next. She's not wrong, Lady Evangeline said, appearing at Ravenscroft's elbow. And it might look weak if you hide her away now. The court needs to see that she's strong enough to handle threats. Ravenscroft looked like he wanted to argue, but finally he nodded. Fine. But we do this in private, not in front of the entire court. They retreated to his chambers, a sprawling suite carved from the living rock of Nocturne's foundations. The main room held furniture that ranged from medieval to modern, a collection built over centuries. Ravenscroft paced like a caged predator while Evangeline, Theron, and Marcus arranged themselves around the room. This is a disaster, Theron said bluntly. He was a warrior vampire, built like a soldier and scarred from countless battles. If you lose tomorrow, we lose Miss Bradford and potentially the entire Northern Court. Casimir's been gathering support for years. A public victory over you would give him the legitimacy to push for leadership. I'm not going to lose, Ravenscroft said. You haven't fought formally in over a century, Evangeline pointed out. Her white hair was styled in elaborate braids, and her silver eyes were worried. Casimir has been training specifically for combat. He's younger, and he's hungry for power. This isn't going to be easy. Which is why we need to consider alternatives, Marcus said. What if Miss Bradford simply withdrew from courtship? Without her as the prize, the challenge becomes meaningless. No. Juliana surprised herself with the vehemence of her response. I'm not running away because some power-hungry vampire thinks he can use me to undermine Ravenscroft, and I'm certainly not letting him win by default. No one's suggesting you run, Evangeline said gently. But we need to think strategically. Your safety is paramount. My safety is my concern. What I care about is Ravenscroft's safety. Juliana moved to stand in front of him, forcing him to stop pacing. Tell me honestly, can you win? His pale eyes met hers, and she saw centuries of experience and absolute certainty in them. Yes, Casimir is strong, but he's arrogant and impatient. I know his weaknesses, and I know how to exploit them. I will win, Juliana. I won't let him take you. The possessive intensity in his voice sent shivers down her spine. Then we prepare. What do you need from me? Stay safe, let my people protect you, and trust that I will do whatever it takes to end this. He cupped her face in his hands. I've lived for 8 centuries, and I've survived countless challenges to my rule. This is just one more, except this time I have something worth fighting for beyond mere power or pride. They spent the rest of the night planning. Theron outlined Casimir's fighting style and suggested strategies to counter it. Evangeline discussed the political implications of various outcomes. Marcus ensured that security around Juliana would be airtight until the challenge was resolved. Dawn came too quickly, and Ravenscroft walked Juliana to the car personally. I need you to promise me something, he said. If somehow things go wrong tomorrow, if I lose, you won't. If I do, he insisted, I need you to promise you'll run. Don't let Casimir claim you. My people will help you disappear, start a new life somewhere far from vampire politics. I'm not promising that because I don't believe it will be necessary. She pulled him down for a fierce kiss. You're going to win because you're stronger than he is, smarter than he is, and because I'm going to be there watching, and I expect to see you victorious, understand? He smiled against her lips. Yes, my lady. Good. Now go get some rest. You have a vampire to defeat tomorrow. Juliana spent the day in a state of anxious anticipation. She tried to distract herself with reading, with correspondence, with anything that would keep her mind off the coming fight. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ravenscroft facing Casimir, saw blood and violence, and the very real possibility that the vampire she'd fallen for might not survive the night, because she had fallen for him. Somewhere between that first kiss in the garden and the hundreds of conversations since, she'd tumbled headlong into love with a creature that shouldn't exist, who saw her scars as badges of honor, who treated her like she was precious despite being centuries old and powerful beyond measure. The car arrived at sunset, but this time Marcus emerged instead of the usual driver. Miss Bradford, I'm to escort you to the arena personally. Lord Falkenburg wanted to ensure your safety. The arena turned out to be a massive circular space carved deep beneath Nocturne, ringed with seating for what looked like thousands of vampires. Already the stands were filling, members of all 4 courts arriving to witness the challenge. The air hummed with anticipation and barely suppressed violence. Marcus led her to a private box overlooking the arena floor, the best view in the house, reserved for royalty. Evangeline and Therkren were already there, along with several vampires Juliana recognized as Ravenscroft's most loyal supporters. How is he? She asked immediately. Focused, Theron said. He's been preparing all day. He'll be ready. The arena continued to fill until every seat was occupied. Vampires from the northern court wore silver and blue. The southern court favored crimson and black. The eastern court wore gold, while the western court chose deep purple. The effect was like a rainbow of predators, all gathered to watch 2 alphas battle for dominance. A horn sounded, deep and resonant, and the arena fell silent. 2 figures emerged from opposite sides of the floor. Ravenscroft looked magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, dressed in close-fitting black that allowed for movement. His white hair was unbound, falling past his shoulders, and his pale eyes seemed to glow in the arena's light. Across from him, Casimir wore deep red, his shorter hair making him look more brutal, more aggressive. An elderly vampire stepped forward, his voice magically amplified to reach every corner of the arena. We gather to witness a challenge under the ancient laws. Lord Casimir of the Southern Court has challenged King Ravenscroft Falkenburg of the Northern Court for the right to court Miss Juliana Bradford. The terms are formal combat, no weapons, no magic, fight until one yields or dies. The victor claims the right to court Miss Bradford and gains the loser's sworn fealty. Do both parties accept these terms? I accept, Ravenscroft said, his voice carrying clearly. I accept, Casimir echoed. Then begin. They moved so fast that Juliana could barely track them. One moment they were standing at opposite ends of the arena. The next they collided in the center with an impact that cracked the stone floor. They exchanged blows that would have killed a human instantly, punches that whistled through the air, kicks that connected with bone-breaking force. Casimir fought like a berserker, all aggression and raw power. He was younger and perhaps physically stronger, pressing Ravenscroft back with a relentless assault. But Ravenscroft fought with centuries of experience, turning Casimir's strength against him, finding openings in his defense and exploiting them ruthlessly. Blood splattered the arena floor, dark vampire blood that smoked slightly where it landed. Casimir managed to land a vicious blow that sent Ravenscroft sprawling, and Juliana's heart stopped for a terrifying moment. But Ravenscroft rolled with the impact, using the momentum to get distance and reset. Is that all you have, old king? Casimir taunted. Perhaps you've grown soft, spending your nights courting humans instead of maintaining your strength. I'm just getting started, Ravenscroft replied calmly. Then he moved. It was like watching poetry written in violence. Ravenscroft stopped holding back, unleashing speed and power that made his earlier fighting look like warm-up exercises. He was everywhere at once, landing blows that drove Casimir back step by step. His strategy became clear. He was wearing the younger vampire down, using Casimir's aggressive style against him, making him waste energy while Ravenscroft remained efficient and controlled. Casimir began to slow, his attacks becoming more desperate and less precise. Ravenscroft capitalized on every mistake, every opening. A kick to the knee that buckled Casimir's leg. A punch to the ribs that cracked bone audibly even from Juliana's distant seat. A strike to the face that sent blood spraying. Yield, Ravenscroft commanded, standing over Casimir as the Southern Lord struggled to rise. Never, Casimir snarled, launching himself at Ravenscroft with the last of his strength. It was a mistake. Ravenscroft caught him mid-leap, using Casimir's momentum to slam him into the ground with devastating force. He pinned the other vampire, one hand around his throat, fangs extended in a clear threat. Yield, he repeated. I don't want to kill you, Casimir, but I will if you force my hand. The arena was utterly silent. Everyone watched as Casimir struggled weakly, realized he had no chance of escape, and finally went limp in submission. "I yield." Ravenscroft stood, releasing Casimir and stepping back. The elderly vampire referee stepped forward. "Lord Casimir has yielded. King Ravenscroft is victorious. Under the ancient laws, Lord Casimir owes the victor his sworn fealty." Casimir struggled to his feet, blood streaking his face and clothes. For a moment, Juliana thought he might refuse, might challenge the ruling. But then he dropped to one knee, head bowed. "I, Casimir of the Southern Court, swear fealty to Ravenscroft Falkenburg, King of the Northern Court. I acknowledge his right to court Miss Juliana Bradford, and I withdraw all objections to a human queen. This I swear by blood and honor." The oath was binding. Juliana had learned enough about vampire law to know that breaking it would make Casimir an outcast among his own kind. The threat was neutralized, at least for now. Ravenscroft turned to look up at the royal box, his eyes finding Juliana immediately. Even from a distance she could see the triumph and relief in his expression. She stood, and before anyone could stop her, she was moving. Down the stairs and onto the arena floor. Vampires gasped. Humans didn't just enter the arena, especially during formal challenges. But she didn't care about protocol. She ran across the blood-stained stone and threw herself into Ravenscroft's arms. He caught her easily, spinning her around despite his injuries. "Juliana, you won!" she said, laughing and crying simultaneously. "You magnificent, terrifying vampire, you won! Of course I did. I told you I would." He set her down gently, cupping her face. "I couldn't lose. Not when I finally found something worth living for instead of just existing." "I love you," she heard herself say. The words echoed through the arena, amplified by its acoustics. "I don't care if it's too soon or if it's crazy or if it complicates your politics. I love you, Ravenscroft Falkenburg." The arena erupted in noise, cheers and gasps and excited chatter. But Ravenscroft only had eyes for her. "I love you too," he said quietly. "I have since the moment you showed me your scars and trusted me not to flinch. Since you faced down Lady Selene with grace instead of anger. Since you walked into my world without fear and made it better just by being in it." He kissed her there in the arena, in front of thousands of vampires. And the message was clear: she was his, he was hers, and anyone who objected would face the same fate as Casimir. When they finally pulled apart, the elderly referee cleared his throat. "King Ravenscroft, do you wish to make any formal announcements?" Ravenscroft kept one arm around Juliana as he addressed the assembled courts. "I do. As of tonight, Miss Juliana Bradford is formally recognized as my chosen consort and future queen. Any who wish to object may do so now and face me the way Casimir did." Silence. Not a single vampire spoke up. Then it settled. "The Northern Court will have a human queen, and she will bridge our world with theirs. Change is coming, whether we're ready or not. I suggest we prepare for it together." He looked at Casimir, still kneeling bloodied on the arena floor. "Lord Casimir, you've sworn fealty. I accept your oath and I offer you a place in my court if you choose to take it. Your strength and experience would be valuable if you can learn to direct them toward building something rather than tearing it down." Casimir looked shocked, then slowly nodded. "I accept, my king. Thank you for your mercy." It was a political masterstroke, turning a defeated enemy into an ally, showing strength through mercy rather than cruelty. Juliana squeezed Ravenscroft's hand, proud of him and amazed at how deftly he navigated the complexity of vampire politics. The celebrations that followed lasted until dawn. Vampires from all four courts came to offer their congratulations, their concerns, their pledges of support. Juliana found herself at the center of attention, answering questions about human culture and assuring nervous vampires that she had no intention of undermining their traditions. Lady Selene approached near the end, her expression thoughtful. "You handled that well, Miss Bradford, both the challenge and its aftermath. Perhaps you truly are strong enough to be our queen." "I'm going to try my best," Juliana said honestly. "I know I have a lot to learn about your world, but I hope you'll help teach me if you're willing." "I think I might be." Selene offered a small smile. "You showed mercy to me when you could have demanded punishment. That's a quality we need in our leadership, the wisdom to temper justice with compassion. I'll support you if you'll allow it. I'd be grateful for your support." As the celebration wound down, Ravenscroft pulled her aside to a quiet balcony overlooking Nocturne. The city glowed softly below them, peaceful and beautiful. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "It's been quite a night. Exhausted, exhilarated, terrified, in love." She leaned against him, careful of his healing injuries. "Is it always this dramatic in your world?" "Not always. But vampire politics can be intense when the stakes are high." He tilted her chin up so he could see her face. "I need to ask you something important. Tonight made it clear that you'll always be in some danger as my queen. There will always be vampires who see humans as inferior, who object to our relationship, who might try to use you to get to me. Knowing that, are you sure this is what you want? Juliana thought about her old life, the endless rejections, the pity, the sense of being fundamentally broken in the eyes of her own people. Then she thought about the past weeks with Ravenscroft, feeling valued and desired and loved for exactly who she was, scars included. She thought about the challenge to find her place in a larger world, to be part of something important and meaningful. I'm sure, she said firmly. I won't pretend I'm not scared sometimes. This world is dangerous and strange and nothing like what I grew up expecting. But with you, I feel more alive than I ever did in drawing rooms and ballrooms. I feel like I matter, like I can make a difference. So yes, I'm sure. I want this. I want you. I want the future we can build together. Then I have one more question. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and when he opened it, Juliana gasped. Inside was a ring unlike anything she'd ever seen, silver metal worked into delicate patterns, holding a stone that seemed to contain captured moonlight. This is a moonstone ring, made by vampire craftsmen 300 years ago for a queen who never came to be. I've kept it all this time, waiting for the right person to give it to. Juliana Bradford, will you marry me? Will you become my wife, my queen, and my partner in all things? Yes, she breathed. Yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, warming against her skin despite its silver construction. Then he kissed her again, sweet and deep and full of promise. But there was still one thing they needed to discuss. Juliana pulled back slightly, meeting his eyes. The immortality question. We should talk about that. We don't have to decide now. The turning process is irreversible, and I won't rush you into it. I know. But I've been thinking about it. She looked out over Nocturne, this hidden city full of immortal beings who'd built something beautiful in the darkness. If I stay human, I'll age while you stay the same. I'll have maybe 50 or 60 years if I'm lucky, and then I'll die and leave you alone again. That doesn't seem fair to either of us. I would take whatever time you could give me. I know you would, but I don't want to give you just a few decades. I want centuries with you. I want to see the future we're building, to watch the world change, to grow alongside you rather than away from you. She turned back to him. I want you to turn me. Not immediately, I'd like some time to prepare, to say goodbye to my mortal life properly. But eventually, yes, I want to be like you. Ravenscroft's expression was a complex mix of emotions: joy, worry, hope, fear. It's not an easy process. It's 3 days of agony while your body transforms, and there's no guarantee you'll survive it. Some humans are simply incompatible with vampire blood and they die in the turning. What are the odds? About 70% survive. Higher if the human is young and healthy, which you are. But 30% is still a significant risk. I'll take that risk. When the time is right, when we're both ready, I'll take that risk for a chance at forever with you. She took his hands. But not yet. Let me be human for a little while longer. Let me have a proper wedding in the sunlight. Let my father walk me down an aisle. Let me experience this last bit of mortality before I give it up. Then that's what we'll do. He kissed her forehead. A wedding in the sunlight, with all the human traditions you want, and then, when you're ready, I'll turn you, and we'll face eternity together. The next few months were a whirlwind of preparation. They planned 2 weddings, one traditional human ceremony for Juliana's family and mortal friends, and one elaborate vampire ritual for the courts. The human wedding came first, held in a flower-filled garden on a beautiful spring day. Juliana wore white silk and lace, with short sleeves that showed her scars proudly. Her father cried as he walked her down the aisle, and her friends celebrated with genuine joy. Ravenscroft couldn't attend the ceremony itself. Daylight weddings were beyond even his tolerance, but he appeared at the reception after sunset, and the sight of him in formal human attire made Juliana's breath catch. They danced together as the sun set completely, and for that one perfect evening they existed purely in the human world, celebrating love in all its mortal glory. The vampire wedding came a week later, held in Nocturne's grandest hall with representatives from all 4 courts in attendance. Juliana wore a gown that seemed woven from shadows and starlight, commissioned by vampire artisans who specialized in clothing that honored both human and vampire aesthetics. The ceremony itself was conducted in a language older than Latin, with blood oaths and eternal promises that made her human wedding seem almost simple by comparison. But when Ravenscroft said, "I claim you as mine in this life and all that may come after," and she responded, "I claim you as mine until the stars burn out and the world ends," the meaning was universal. They belonged to each other, completely and irrevocably. The celebration lasted 3 days, and by the end of it, even skeptical vampires had to admit that Juliana was proving herself a worthy queen. She navigated vampire politics with increasing skill, built alliances between the courts, and worked with Evangeline to create new policies that would help vampires integrate more safely with the modern human world. 6 months into their marriage, Juliana woke one morning knowing it was time. She found Ravenscroft in his study reviewing documents by lamplight. "I'm ready," she said simply. He looked up, understanding immediately what she meant. "Are you certain? Once it's done, there's no going back." "I'm certain. I want eternity with you. I want to be strong enough to stand beside you without fear. I want to see where the world goes next, and I want to experience it as your true equal, not as a fragile human you have to protect." She moved to stand in front of him. "Turn me, Ravenscroft. Make me yours completely." They chose the next new moon for the turning, a date considered auspicious in vampire tradition. Juliana said her goodbyes to her father, who cried but understood. She wrote letters to her human friends, explaining that she was going away for a while for a special medical treatment, that she'd return eventually but might seem different. The turning itself was everything Ravenscroft had warned her about and worse. It began with him draining nearly all her blood, bringing her to the edge of death. Then he fed her his own blood, the ancient power of it burning through her veins like liquid fire. For 3 days she existed in agony, her body literally transforming at the cellular level. Ravenscroft never left her side, holding her through the worst of it, whispering encouragements and promises. Evangeline and Theron stood guard, monitoring her progress with worried expressions. The hours blended together in a haze of pain and occasional moments of lucidity, where she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Then, on the 3rd day, the pain suddenly stopped. Juliana opened eyes that now saw in ways human vision never could. She could make out individual dust motes in the air, could see the variations in the stone walls that she'd never noticed before. Her hearing was painfully sharp. She could hear conversations happening rooms away, could detect heartbeats that announced the presence of the few human servants who worked in the citadel. And she was hungry, so desperately hungry, that she could barely think past it. "Easy," Ravenscroft said, his hand on her shoulder grounding her. "The hunger is always worst at first. We'll feed you safely, teach you control." He brought her donated blood, ethically sourced from willing human donors who were compensated and carefully monitored. It tasted like the finest wine and the richest food combined, satisfying something deep inside her that she hadn't known existed until now. After, she felt stronger, clearer, more herself than she'd been in the 3 days of transformation. "How do you feel?" Evangeline asked. "Different. Everything is sharper, more intense. And I feel powerful, like I could run for miles or lift a car." Juliana looked at her arms, noting that her scars were still there. Vampire transformation didn't erase existing damage, but they seemed different now, less tender. "The scars are still here. Physical scars remain," Ravenscroft confirmed. "They're part of your history, your story. They were beautiful before, and they're beautiful now." The next weeks were dedicated to learning what it meant to be a vampire. Ravenscroft taught her to control her strength so she didn't accidentally break things. Theron trained her in combat, revealing that she had natural talent for strategy if not for pure physical power. Evangeline showed her how to navigate vampire society with her new senses and abilities. But the best part was the freedom. Juliana could move through Nocturne without fear now, could explore the parts of the vampire world that had been too dangerous for a fragile human. She went with Ravenscroft on diplomatic missions to other courts, standing beside him as a true equal rather than a protected consort. Lady Selene became an unexpected friend and ally, teaching Juliana the subtle art of vampire politics. "You're doing well," she said one evening as they reviewed trade agreements between the courts. "Better than most newly turned vampires, actually. You've adapted quickly to your new nature." "I have good teachers," Juliana said. "And I'm motivated. This world, this life, it's everything I never knew I wanted." The biggest test came when Casimir requested a private audience. He'd been true to his oath, serving loyally in Ravenscroft's court and helping bridge the gap between northern and southern vampires. But Juliana still remembered the challenge, the way he'd looked at her like property to be won. "Miss, forgive me, Queen Juliana," he said, bowing formally. "I wanted to apologize in person for my behavior before your turning. I was arrogant and disrespectful, seeing you as a political tool rather than a person. Serving in this court has taught me better. You've been a remarkable queen, and Ravenscroft was right to choose you." "Thank you, Lord Casimir. I appreciate the apology, and I appreciate your service." She studied him thoughtfully. "What changed your mind about human queens and vampire-human relations?" "You did, watching you navigate our world, seeing how you've strengthened the Northern Court by bringing fresh perspectives and building bridges with human society. It's made me reconsider many of my assumptions." He met her eyes directly. "I still believe vampires are superior to humans in many ways. But I'm beginning to understand that superiority doesn't mean we should dominate. Your strength is different from ours, but no less valuable. It wasn't a complete transformation of attitude, but it was progress. And progress, Juliana had learned, was how you change the world not through sudden revolution, but through small shifts in thinking that accumulated over time. Years passed. Juliana grew into her role as queen, becoming a beloved figure in the Northern Court and a respected leader in vampire politics more broadly. She and Ravenscroft traveled the world, meeting with other vampire leaders, establishing new protocols for vampire-human interaction, and slowly working toward a future where both species could coexist openly. She never regretted the scars that had set her on this path. In vampire society, they marked her as someone who'd suffered and survived, earning her a respect that unmarked skin never could have. And Ravenscroft still kissed them regularly, reminding her that she was loved exactly as she was. 10 years after her turning, they stood together on the balcony overlooking Nocturne. The underground city had grown, incorporating new architecture that blended human and vampire aesthetics. The population had swelled as more vampires chose to settle in the Northern Court's territory, drawn by the progressive policies and the promise of a different way of living. "Do you ever miss it?" Ravenscroft asked. "Your human life? Sometimes I miss the sunlight," Juliana admitted, "and there are moments when I wish I could see my father again." Richard Bradford had passed away 5 years earlier, content that his daughter had found happiness even if he didn't fully understand her new life. "But no, I don't miss being human. This life with you, in this world we're building together, it's better than anything I could have imagined." "I love you," he said, pulling her close. "Every day I'm grateful that you walked into that garden 10 years ago and gave me a chance. I love you too. Thank you for seeing past my scars to the person beneath. Thank you for building a world where I could be strong and valued and free." Below them, Nocturne sparkled in the crystal light. Music drifted up from the streets where vampires celebrated the anniversary of their queen's turning. In the distance, human ambassadors negotiated with vampire diplomats, working toward the day when both species could acknowledge each other openly without fear. It wasn't a perfect world. There were still vampires who resented Juliana's influence, still humans who feared what they didn't understand. But it was a better world than the one they'd started with, and it grew better with each passing year. Juliana looked at the ring on her finger, the moonstone that caught the light, and held it. She thought about the girl she'd been scarred and rejected, hiding behind long sleeves and lowered expectations. She thought about the vampire king who'd kissed those scars and shown her that damage didn't define worth, that strength came in many forms, that love could transcend species and centuries. "Ready to go back inside?" Ravenscroft asked. "The celebration is in your honor. We should probably make an appearance." In a minute, he turned to kiss him, soft and sweet, a gesture they'd shared thousands of times and would share thousands more. "I just want to savor this moment, all of it. The city, the celebration, you, us. We have eternity for moments like this, I know, and I can't wait to experience every single one of them with you." They went back inside together, hand in hand, king and queen of a world that existed in the shadows but reached toward the light. Behind them, Nocturne continued its eternal dance, a city of vampires learning to dream of a future where hiding was a choice rather than a necessity, where humans and vampires could meet as equals, where love could bridge any divide. And at the center of it all was a woman who'd once hidden her scars from a world that called them ugly, who now wore them proudly as a queen in a kingdom that celebrated survival in all its forms. She'd been burned by fire and rejected by her own kind, but she'd risen from those ashes to find a love that would last forever, a purpose that mattered, and a place where she truly belonged. In the end, the scars that had once seemed like the end of her story became the beginning of something far greater, a legend whispered in both human and vampire circles about the human queen who'd changed everything, who'd shown two species that coexistence was possible, who'd proven that strength and beauty came in unexpected forms. Juliana Bradford, once the rejected daughter of a failing estate, became Juliana Falkenburg, queen of the Northern Court, beloved wife, and the bridge between two worlds. And she lived happily ever after, in darkness and in love, with a vampire king who cherished every scar, every flaw, every perfect imperfection that made her exactly who she was meant to be. The future stretched before them like an endless night full of stars, and they faced it together, bound by love that was stronger than mortality, deeper than blood, and eternal as the darkness in which they thrived. Their story became the foundation for a new era, proof that the most unlikely connections could become the most unbreakable bonds, and that sometimes the person you're meant to be is found not in the world you're born into, but in the one you're brave enough to embrace.